Hello, everyone. It's Mike Hopper here with Sell for 1%. I'm here with my colleagues, Dave, Jason, and Jamie. Jay is back with us, and he is going to do the term of the week. Jay, what is it this week?
The term of the week is hydrostatic pressure.
Okay.
Hydrostatic pressure is typically presented to a home buyer or a home seller as a crack that runs horizontally left to right across the basement walls. I call this the showstopper crack because when I'm showing homes to buyers, this is the number one thing that's going to blow my deal up either later at a home inspection or when the buyer's in the basement looking and they see this enormous crack running across the wall. As a home seller, you want to kind of get out in front of some of this stuff, but at the same time, I don't typically recommend my sellers get a structural engineer or a home inspection. And the reason being is as soon as you open that can of worms, now you got to disclose every single finding. So some of this stuff, it's not a hidden issue. The crack can be seen, but we kind of want to let it play out the way it's going to play out because some buyers, they know somebody, they have an uncle who's a basement guy, or hey, the last house I bought had the same issue. And also what I found in my career is that most of the time, that crack really is a non-issue when you start peeling back the onion. The first thing to look at is how much deflection is in the wall. So if you stand and look at that crack left to right, and a real telltale sign is the window sills in the basement. If that window is sitting straight, that wall's not deflecting. But if the window starts to kind of lean back, okay, that wall is moving. That window was set in there straight by the builder. So you got a home that's 50, 60 years old and you see this crack running left to right, that window sill is sitting perfectly upright. That thing hasn't moved in 60 years. And so odds are you're going to be okay. But now if you start taking a look and you can tell that, hey, the electric panel is kind of hanging off the wall to incline, okay, we're going to have some problems. And so what I've done is I actually carry a level in my car and I'll bring it out and I'll stick it up on that wall and I'll look with the buyer. What is that? Where that level is flush on the wall, how big is the gap at the top? If the gap is tiny, probably going to be okay to pay for a home inspection. If that gap is 1.5 inches or more, we can try and leverage it back on the seller, but you're going to have $400 in a home inspection to find something that we already know is wrong. And so, part of this becomes an equation and a calculus into, well, do we want to hammer the seller later with this, or is it going to pass and be a non-issue? Or do we say, this is the showstopper, this house sucks, let's go buy one that doesn't have this issue? The biggest thing I think that kind of keep in mind as a buyer and a seller, to fix a wall like that, it can range on how big the wall is, how big the crack is. But, my experience is typically it's a $2,500, $5,000 type deal to fix that wall. And when I say fix the wall, I mean fix it, 30-year guarantee, structural engineer, everything done properly. That wall is fixed. I don't think you can put a roof on a house for $5,000 anymore. Oh. I don't, so I think to put that into perspective, yeah, it's scary, but what's an air conditioner cost? What does a furnace cost? I mean, this is just another replacement cost as a homeowner that you're going to deal with. So, I think that the way it's presented by buyer agents to their buyer, you might get freaked out, but miss on a really good deal or a really good house in the neighborhood you want because you really don't know what you're dealing with.
Well, it's something that you can have an expert come and take a look at it. Out of curiosity, Jay, and if you know this, how are those cracks, like how does that hydrostatic pressure build up back there? How does that actually happen?
Yeah, I guess that's actually the word of the day is the hydrostatic pressure. And so, we had a basement guy named Jim Groves, and as a buyer agent, I would go to every single home inspection, every appointment with basement guys, and I would be quiet and I would listen, which I'm sure my dad doesn't believe that I can do that, but I was able to close my lips and listen and absorb this. So what Jimmy Groves would do, he would walk into a basement and he would say, okay, you got these cinder blocks stacked up here. There's 3 holes in a cinder block.
You're forgetting the very first thing that he would say.
Well, he would make a comment about my eyebrows, and then I would comment him on his mustache, and we would have a laugh, and he'd ask how Uncle Steve was. And then we would get into the basement talk, which
But
was,
his first statement was, anytime you dig a hole in the ground, you're going to have water.
well, I was getting there, old boy.
All right.
I'm getting there. And so you have cinder blocks that have 3 holes in them, right? And if you look at a basement wall, the way they stack these up, those holes all align. Those are called weep holes. And if you dig a hole in the ground, you're going to find water. So these blocks are porous. They're designed to bring water in. And the design is that they hit the weep holes. They go down to your drain tile, which then goes over to your sump pump out of the house. What happens here in Ohio is you're bringing in iron ore, you're bringing in minerals, you're bringing in, mold and mildew from the leaves that are decaying, and that will come through the walls and present itself as everescence, little crusty, fuzzy things on the walls. And so what's happening is, as that water's coming in with the minerals, it's actually starting to clog up the weep holes, either somewhere in the block or down in the drain tile. A clog begins, water starts to build up, and you have events such as freezing. You have issues where the wall is pushing the hydrostatic pressure. The wall is pushing, the dirt is pushing back with the water on the wall and starting to make the wall cave in.
Mhm.
This crack, when it's hydrostatic pressure, is typically going to be about 3 or 4 blocks down.
Right.
Okay. If the crack running left to right is up higher and is on the first or second block, okay, that's not a hydrostatic pressure issue as much as it is the way that they built it back in the 60s. And then you got to start determining when did that wall move. And there's a couple other things that go into it. But the point is, if the crack is high, it's not hydrostatic pressure. And if that crack running left to right is on the very bottom block, that's called searing, which is fixed the same way with the beams, but a much different beast and not ideal. You don't want searing. But the hydrostatic pressure is caused by water building up in the walls. And I've always been told that at some point that water freezes, and that's why that crack is typically along the freeze line.
Yep.
But I've also been taught that, you can have this, the way that the builder backfills it, that the water and the dirt can push against the wall and cause that same exact issue without having a freeze event.
Okay.
And so the fix is generally you're going to put steel I-beams in to stabilize the wall.
So the fix is you at this point, you want to bring an engineer out to prescribe the fix instead of just kind of winging it. But what the engineers are going to tell you is you want to have a steel I-beam every 4 feet. Used to be a longer span, but now it's every 4 feet. And what they do is they'll cut the floor out, they drop the beam into the footer, put the concrete back, and then there's a specific way to tie the beam into the floor joist above, so that in order for that wall to move, we're talking about an earthquake, right? The footer and the joist have to move. And
Right.
so that's where you get that 30-year guarantee. There's a couple different styles, a couple different systems, like the Basement Doctor here locally. They have their own patented system where, you got to twist a spring every couple years. I know that Jim Groves, our guy, did not like that at all, wanted something static that's going to stay and not move.
Right.
I think also a really valuable thing to take away from this as a buyer, the guarantees are kind of worthless. And I know it's not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy, but bring in the engineer, make sure it's done right. You can't depend on a basement company to still be in business 30 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So the guarantee is great, but if that company sells, like J&J, or that company goes out of business, guarantee's not there anymore. So you want to make sure the work is done right versus finding the cheapest basement guy that gives you a 10-year guarantee who's up here not blocking the beam properly.
Right.
There is a proper way to do this that's documented by FHA, and the engineers will share it with you. Our engineer will walk it with you, show you how to do it. He's even trained guys on how to install the beams. And so there is a right way and a wrong way to do this. And if you do it the wrong way and you spend good money on it, it sucks to suck. The next buyer is going to beat you up and get an $8,000 basement job done by the Basement Doctor because you spent $5,000 and didn't know you were getting taken for a ride.
Right.
So it's a pretty cool business in a field. It's very nuanced. You start getting into it. The biggest advice I can give to a buyer would be get an engineer you trust
Mm-hmm.
and get a referral from him on what basement companies to trust.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate it, Jay. Thank you very much. I know that that's something that I've run across on a regular basis. And all you home buyers out there, you're probably, even if you're just starting out, the first few homes you find, you might run across this too. And it's just the way that homes were built here. It's the soil and clay that is in Columbus and around Central Ohio that this can be an issue. So I think moral of the story from Jay is, negotiate from a place of fact. Make sure that you're getting good, solid information on how that crack was formed and how to properly fix it. I appreciate it, Jay. Thank you very much. If any buyers who are watching this need any information for a structural engineer or good companies to fix this, we can help provide that information. We work with several people around here in Central Ohio and a great structural engineer who's worked with FHA. So give us a call if you have any issues.